All right, Jon Jones exposes Dana White in the UFC. He speaks on his time at the UFC. As you know, UFC fighters have been complaining about, a lack of pay. Jon Jones goes in and talk about his time at the UFC and being a young fighter and saying that they took advantage of him being young and naive and how they was tossing him Bentleys to fight fighters like Lyoto Machida and several other fighters, while they're tossing him cars and Bentleys behind the scenes. They're making $10 million off Jon Jones's name. Okay. And Jon Jones said, look, you guys have ripped me off for years. I'm not even asking for a payback. I'm just asking, to be treated fair from here on out, and he says, when you're young, get paid as much as you can. He said, everything is cool until you start wanting to require generational wealth, just like the people that you're working for. And that's where the problem is going to come in at. And I would say, regardless of Jon Jones' massive fuck up sheet, he's 100% right. I done told y'all about Dana White and what's going on at the UFC. Dana White was put on the spot, and somebody asked him why were so many UFC fighters all of a sudden complaining about money and stuff like that. Dana White says, oh, that's a stupid question. I don't know why you say that. Blah, 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 blah. He said because of the quarantine and blah, blah, blah.
But you want me to tell you why this is going on right now? Well, I love you. You know I love you, but that is a really stupid question.
No, it's not a stupid.
Such a stupid question.
You know what you're talking.
We're in a fucking pandemic, and the world is going crazy right now. And all these guys are like, well, I want more money too. I want more money.
And on the surface, that might seem like a good excuse. But you want to know what it really is? It's not because it's quarantine and people are not working, so they're stressing about money. It's not just that. See, during this quarantine, just like me and everybody else, you had time to seriously think about your life and what's going on with it. During this quarantine, we have all had that kind of time. We have time to reflect on our life. That's one thing that I can say is good about this quarantine. You reflected on your life. These fighters got time to reflect over their life and pay attention to details that they couldn't pay attention to because the train was moving, they was training, they was distracted. But when things stay still, you can put your finger on stuff. You can start to pay attention. You can start to notice things. Maybe you'll look at your old contract. Maybe you'll look at this and maybe you'll look at that. But the whole point is you reevaluate your life and you're looking at it from a different perspective. And if you're anything like me, you're looking at how can I come out of this situation and in this pandemic better? You know what I'm saying? Better. So all fighters are going to be looking at their situation and want the best for themselves. And it still doesn't stop the fact that you can't keep any star athletes due to you not wanting to pay them. Where do you want to go with this? You know what I'm saying? We can go to Tito Ortiz, to Chuck Liddell. We can go to George Rush St. Pierre. We can go to Nick Diaz. We can go to Conor McGregor. And the list goes on. And the reason why it looks so bad, and this is what Dana White don't understand, the reason why it looks so bad is because he easily calls Jon Jones the GOAT, the greatest to ever do it, right? And the greatest to ever do it is telling you the company that I did it for ripped me off, okay? And I didn't get paid anything. And to show how much they're big on ripping people off, look, I'm a star. I helped build this sport. I helped make the UFC what it is today. Jon Jones, I'm a draw, regardless of what I do. And look at the stance that I have to take. I have to walk away from it because they're still trying to mistreat the biggest star, the so-called GOAT of MMA. That's how they do the GOAT of MMA. What are they gonna do to your little old rinky ass? And that's the problem with MMA. But that's cool because I'm here to recruit. That's all this is about. You know what I'm saying? See, in boxing, you ain't gonna have to worry about that. You can get paid over here. I don't know about over there, but over here you can get paid. Once again, what put your boy Conor McGregor up in that skybox? What made him the spokesman for whiskey and all that, this and that? He couldn't make that kind of money in the UFC. Conor McGregor was smart enough to know that he needed to leave the UFC to come to boxing. And you see, it only took one fight. One fight put that man over the hill. And he ain't had to look back since. You know, now, don't get me wrong, I got stuff to say about McGregor retiring and stuff like that. But there's another side of me, shit, I don't blame him. Dana White don't act right. And at what point in time, if you look at the paper trail, and if you look at the history, everybody's complaining about the same thing. Money, bro. You're not paying me. I'm a star. Pay me. And this is the thing. You guys make too much money not to pay them. You know, you make too much money not to pay them. And this is the problem. Had you free up and let them have their own sponsorships, that would just take heat off you. But that just proves how greedy they are. These guys can't even get their own sponsorship. They got to get a sponsor ran through the UFC. So the sponsorship really goes to UFC, and UFC pays them a little bit of tricklets for the deal that they get paid for Reebok with. Because this is why this is so crucial. Because you could be like, look, man, it's your responsibility to look after yourself. And, you know, you got to know this is people going to take advantage of what you don't know. You got to come in here and you got to make the most of it and stuff like that. This is the problem with making the most of it. Let's say, okay, well, he put you on the stage. Why didn't you just take what you already had and grow upon it? Well, Chuck Liddell ran into the same thing. He found out that there's stuff he couldn't do because the UFC or whatever has ties or ownership to his name. You know what I'm saying? So they didn't want Chuck Liddell doing movies, so he had to go through them to get that kind of stuff done. Now, I currently seen Amanda Nunes and it looks like a beer commercial. You know what I'm saying? I guarantee you that wasn't a contract, that's something that she got on her own or on her side or her agents or whatever. I guarantee you that commercial and whatever she got paid for sponsoring that beer, I guarantee you that is ran through the UFC. I guarantee you that ran through the UFC and ran through Amanda Nunes. I guarantee that company didn't come to Amanda Nunes straight up and say, look, we want you to sponsor such and such and such and such. No, that shit was ran through the UFC. And that's the problem. Even outside this, they can't build their name or their brand because the UFC owns that. So you kill their sponsorships. You don't allow them to put them in a position to go do other things. It gotta be leased out through you or something like that. So you basically cut off their avenues to make money because you're saying that they can't, because that you deserve a percentage because their name is built off of your platform and you built that and this, that, and the third. You putting these guys in the catch-22 where they ain't got no choice, where they're basically slaves. You know what I'm saying? They can't go fight nowhere else. They can't do nothing. They're just slaves. And we all know you will ruin the business over ego. Look what you did to the Diaz brothers. I will keep bringing up the Diaz brothers because as a businessman, I swear all I need is the opportunity and the backing of the money, because I got the ideas that can take us to the goal. There's no way in hell I would have went against Nate Diaz and Nick Diaz, recognizing that these dudes had a cult fucking following. Let me tell you something. If you put the Diaz brothers on an EA Sports UFC game, do you know how much you would have sold? See, you thought putting Ronda Rousey on there was the big thing, and this is no. Do you know what it would have sold if you used the Diaz brothers for the cover? That shit would have sold triple of what it was. Fuck Ronda Rousey. You know what I'm saying? Because still right now, people ain't no fans of Ronda Rousey. I guarantee you, if you bring up Nick and Nate Diaz in the UFC, watch eyes open up. They love them boys. They got a cult fucking following. Why would I go against them? And what did they complain about? Money. I would have gave Nate Diaz whatever the fuck he wanted. Nate Diaz gave you one of the biggest fights in UFC history. He gave you one of the most memorable fights in UFC history. Nate Diaz made the whole Conor McGregor thing. You know what I'm saying? He had what's that saying that Nate Diaz had at the end that he had everybody saying? What was it? Not everybody's on steroids, the other thing. It was one of his slogans. I forgot what it was, but y'all know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying? You had that, you could have ran. Man, you could have ran with that. But these guys are so big on pimping these guys, and that's what fighters got to understand. UFC and boxers. Promoters and all that, look, this is a pimp hoe game. That's how they look at you no matter what. They're running hoes. That's how you gonna have to listen. Listen, I'm sorry, you may not like it. That's how they look at the game. They're flesh peddling. That's all it is. They're running their hoes. Period. Anytime you put your body out there to get beat up, used, and abused, and for another man to make more money off your abused body than you a hoe. You may be a well-paid, well-groomed, well-drove, well-living hoe, but you's a hoe. Unless you have hands-on with the decisions and what's going on and all that stuff like that. And that's just the truth about the situation. You know what I'm saying? But I agree with Jon Jones. Yes, he is clearing the road for some people in the future. But who started this whole thing, it was actually started by Conor McGregor, and they knew that. Conor McGregor started a domino effect that Dana White could not contain, and they knew that. They knew after Conor McGregor, there would be another one, Conor McGregor, and there'll be another one requesting. They seen that. Who used to be the owners of the UFC? The Fertitas or whatever? They seen that shit. I was telling my friends years ago when they got out the game, I said, look, they see the shit that Conor McGregor brought in, and they can see in the future, and they was like, this shit ain't looking good, I'm cashing out. Because they knew Conor McGregor opened up Pandora's box and they could not close it back, so it's time for us to get the fuck out the game for all these other fighters start making requests and start dictating it to us. And let's get out the game before they actually recognize their power. That's really what's going on with UFC fighters. They're recognizing their power. And Dana White is trying to keep that strong hold on how he got things running and penny pushing these guys. But without the fighters, there is no fight, there is no money, there is no UFC. Strength is in numbers, so unify. Bruce Van, I'm out.